cold open.
Mm-hmm.
Today we got Tillamook's new waffle cone ice cream sandwich. I'm not sure if they're new everywhere. They had a sticker that said new product on our grocery store shelves. So I said, hell yeah, dog.
Sign me up.
Waffle cone with a layer of chocolate on it and then ice cream in the middle.
As an ice cream sandwich.
Yeah.
So this first one is Oregon strawberry.
Yes, this is Oregon strawberry and mint chocolate chip.
Make sure you lick the rim, Bryn.
Stop it. It's very strawberry. I really like the cookie.
The cookie does crumble.
The chocolate helps hold it together, though, I think.
I think this is a little too toothpastey for me as a mint.
Here, try the strawberry then.
But it's tasty. I would still eat it. It's just a little on the, like, toothpaste side. Okay.
All right, fall apart on me completely.
I think I like the strawberry.
I like the mint.
There's something about strawberry and chocolate that's so sexy.
Mm.
That's not a hot take at all.
It's no grilled cheese and tomato. Welcome to episode 12 of Cult Flavors Going Off. I'm Bryn.
I'm Sarah.
And this is Fry.
For those of you listening, Fry is our canine companion. 33% pitbull, turns out.
It's Mr. Worldwide.
Anyway, this week we are talking about how to make reasonable cookware purchases without test data. We've got a listener question about our craziest kitchen stories, and we're following up on our cookbook red flags ranking from a couple of weeks ago with our cookbook green flags.
And we tried really hard to make them not just like, isn't from Maddie Matheson.
Yeah, I think I did a good job, but you'll have to find out.
I always think you did a good job, Sarah.
But before we get into it, we want to take a second to thank our sponsors.
Hey. Thank you to the 198 of you who support us. If you didn't know, Cult Flav is completely community supported. We don't do ads. We don't do creator funds, which are just ads. We don't do brand deals, which are just other ads. We don't think ads are good for the world.
Yeah.
But they also make our content less fun to consume. So we're like, fuck that shit.
We're not
We'll
doing
just go straight to the people at home and ask them to support us. $20 a year, not a month, a year, is where we start. And all it does is help us make stuff faster. You don't get really anything else for it. If we sell products, we will probably make them members first. That is currently the plan. I just haven't done it yet.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yep.
We are beholden to you and not a mattress company. That's the main takeaway. If that's a thing that you're interested in supporting, if we are a thing you're interested in supporting, if you feel like you've got $20 worth of advice or information from us.
Or entertainment,
whatever, chuck us $20. It really helps, honestly.
Yeah, thank you. The link is in the description.
All right, let's get into it.
So last week, during our conversation with May from Day with May, we talked about very expensive pepper grinders and like the kind of the progression of moving through ice cream machines that we both had. So I thought that was kind of interesting to figure out, like, okay, what is a framework for making decisions about when it's reasonable to splurge on these products? Like, when is it really a good idea to invest in something? Mm-hmm. And then how do you apply that investment over time?
Is this going to be worth it? Or is this just another marketing gimmick? How am I going to justify the cost of this tool?
Will I get actual use out of it? Or is this like another hyperfixation? Like, we all have a pile of those, right? Mm-hmm. Ice cream is certainly one of those that I see often. And the fact that it kind of stuck with us, it is still a surprise to me. But it's one of those things where I'm glad I didn't invest heavily right out the gate and stuck with something simple until later.
The point is we make these decisions pretty often when we're reviewing products, but most of that is pretty internalized. We haven't really shared a lot of that information.
We don't really examine it that much either. Yeah. It's definitely like okay, I can pick out the exact reasons I didn't pick this product or I did pick this one.
Right.
But like trying to systematize it into rules is not something we've done before.
Yeah. So for this episode, we decided to try and create a framework for folks to understand how we at least evaluate cookware when we're considering them for reviews. And hopefully it helps you.
Yeah. I mean, these are kind of the rules that we would use in our home kitchen anyway. It's just that it's slightly different in that context.
And for the majority, these products are a little bit more focused on the high end of things. But we have definitely identified a few brands out there that we just kind of trust based on their engineering.
Yeah, we mostly want to talk about investments, but there's a lot of good reason to just get a reliable, like, decent product. Mm-hmm. And so there's a handful of brands that we use a lot. Fellow is one that stands out to me. Mm-hmm. The coffee brand, kind of specialty, little bit on the high end for kettles, but low
Mhm.
end for like espresso products, I think, like in terms of cost.
So this is one of those things. It's like a good price with solid engineering
hmm
and a brand that we trust.
They're not like game changing, but the fact that like their Ode grinder has a screw in the back where you can like shift the feed gear.
Yeah.
So like you can like, if we get a hard bean that gets stuck in there, which often happens when you're like home roasting,
hmm
if you under roast, the beans are really hard. Being able to like force that out manually is really nice.
So nice and very considerate of their engineering too.
hmm
They know that you're going to be spending money on this, so they're trying to make it as easy for you to fix it or find like specific replacement parts
hmm
to do the job. I also really love the kettles from Fellow. They're so simple. They're not trying to do too much, and they have this like button to. It's just a simple one button on off situation. So satisfying.
But it's
Quick.
also a dial for adjusting
Yes.
temperature.
hmm
Yeah.
But it's a very simple tool. It looks good, and it does the job at a
It's,
good
it's
price.
very mid-century modern if that's your thing.
Yeah, it really is. Another example of good price, solid engineering is the Vitamix hand blenders. Hand blenders
Yeah.
specifically.
So obviously, like we all know Vitamix for their big blenders, which are very powerful, famously, and also very expensive. I do think that they're good machines generally, not always the case, but the hand blender is one case where they're blowing away the market at a pretty competitive price.
Mhm.
Like we definitely tested units that were more expensive than it by a good margin that weren't nearly as good.
Yeah.
So this is one of those things where I'm like pretty happy with it in that space.
Yeah. I would say the only downside to the Vitamix hand blender is that you have to continuously hold the button for it to engage.
And it doesn't have a mechanical speed selector. It's
Yeah.
digital, so you have to like reset it every single time.
Yep.
So like if I stop doing something for like a couple seconds, I have to like
Yeah.
repick the speed, which is not great.
But all in all, it's a good quality product at a reasonable price.
Yeah.
Solid engineering.
Most of Maiden's stuff,
Yeah.
not all of it, like the
Mhm.
walk weight issues with. They did upgrade some of the features that we complained about, but not the main ones, which was weird.
Mhm.
But they emailed us about that, which was funny. I think that was just like convenient timing because if they didn't address the main issue, then that's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, we had come out with a walk review, and like a day or two later, we got this email from Maiden saying, "Hey, we've upgraded our walk if you want one." And we were like, we looked at it. You did upgrade it slightly, but didn't solve the problems that we had with it. So
Time flies weirdly in the Cult Flave household, but I think that was like 3 weeks afterwards.
if you're not familiar with Maiden, they are mainly a pan company.
They're trying to do like Michelin starred, like pro cook at home kind of vibes. And for a lot of that, I think it's because their investors are mostly like big name chefs.
Yeah.
So like Grant Achatz, yeah,
Nancy Silverton is an
Grant Achatz and
example.
Nick Kokonis from Alinea are
Mhm.
investors. I think they have like a VC fund that
I
they
think
do, which
Thomas
is weird.
Keller's in there too now.
Psh, who cares?
But in general, Maiden stuff is pretty solid, just not the wok. Right in that like pots and pans territory, we have Heritage Steel, specifically the Eater series too. I think is a quality, good price, solid engineering.
I think it's really nice, and for the price point, which is competitive with Maiden, I do think they're more reliable in terms of their shapes.
Mhm.
I think they are. I don't think they reach the highs of some of the Maiden stuff, but they definitely don't reach the lows.
I'd agree with that. I think they do a pretty good job.
Mhm.
And then kind of on a lower price point, but still good engineering is Goldilocks, also pots and pans.
Yeah, they're not outstanding by any means, but they are solid. They're priced extremely well,
So well.
like very well priced for what the product is, I
Yeah.
think.
I think if you're getting into cooking and looking for pots and pans to start with,
hmm
they are a great entry point.
It's a perfect example of like when you're like, okay, I just want to get into cooking. Cooking is the hyperfixation. It's like at a general level.
Right.
Starting there makes sense. I usually don't recommend starter knives because that's something where you can feel bad more quickly.
Yeah.
But with pans, I think it's fine.
And Goldilocks is a great entry point. If you're like, I don't know
Mhm.
how far I want to take this cooking thing, but I want some like good basics.
God, I really want to talk about how annoying it is to see everyone like, oh, I couldn't use my stainless steel pan completely nonstick, so I must be failing completely. It's like this Leidenfrost discourse has gotten so out of hand, and people don't understand it at all.
Bryn
It's
wants 30
killing
seconds
me.
on the clock.
I don't, but it's killing me internally. Beyond those, though, there are
Yeah.
products that end up in the investment category Things that are so expensive, you really need to get that value back out of them.
Yeah.
And that usually means pretty intense comparison shopping. And at that point, the most important work is finding valid reasons to remove items from your list, not add more.
Yeah, just because something is expensive does not mean it's good. And I'm
Mhm.
looking at you, our place.
Mascot for the category. Mascot for the genre. All-time goats. Most overexpensive, under-engineered products. What? I
You know what?
wouldn't buy them with my worst enemy's wallet.
I'm pretty sure what happened here with this company is that they started as a marketing company that fell into cookware. I think they got lucky because they really kicked off during the pandemic when people were stuck at home and they had to cook their own shit and they wanted to get some nice cookware.
Getting rich off the pandemic is one thing, but like
Enter our
falling
place.
into it is such a weird thing.
Yeah.
These are consistently just overpriced bullshit. Like everything we've tested has been among the lowest products we've tested ever. There's a few things I've really wanted to like I was optimistic about. I like the idea of ceramic coatings being better. They've tried to like adjust that. I liked the idea of the titanium in the Always Pan Pro, like that titanium oxide layer. I didn't understand it at first. Now I do, and it's just garbage.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just done testing their shit. Like I just don't trust them.
I have heard good things about like their glasses and plates and cutlery.
Those aren't
But
performance items.
They're not. They're just maybe that's the lane that they need to move
Sure.
into.
I mean, that makes sense. Like if their whole thing, their shtick is about gathering people around the table, it makes sense to make tablewares then. And
Yeah.
that's vibey and they don't have to worry about actually doing a good job of anything.
Yeah.
Like I see their founders like cooking on Instagram or whatever, and they clearly don't give a shit. Like they don't understand what they're doing at all. And I'm like, okay, now I understand how you ended up in this place. But
Oh,
like,
yeah.
it's insane. Oh, it makes me so angry.
Yeah, I feel like they weren't expecting to get that big and then they did and now they're like, what do we do now?
Yeah. Go on Oprah.
Go on, Oprah.
Make cringe TikToks getting into Target. Then you have
Anyway.
Allclad, opposite end of the spectrum. They had something really special, but then they lost the patent, and now they've really like tanked.
Yeah. Specifically what we're talking about is Allclad owned the patent for tri-ply stainless
Right.
steel for a very long time.
Which is now everywhere because they lost it in like 2014, 2016, somewhere in there.
Something like that. I'd have to check. But because they lost the patent, they're no longer special.
Mhm.
However, you still see a lot of people out in the world that are recommending Allclad because they've just heard forever.
You said Arclad, which is
Okay.
that's the great like jam band, like super group from Our Place and Allclad. The two highest margin producers of cookware.
Anyway, you still hear people all the time talking about how, oh, you have to get the best stainless steel and the best stainless steel is Allclad. That's a very old way of looking at stainless steel because now that the patent is expired, you've got so many more companies that can enter in this tri-ply space and
they're
Allclad
beating 'em.
is no longer the best of the best.
They're-
So it doesn't make sense. We need to bury that narrative.
Well, it's just that they're no longer a good value, and so many others are producing way higher quality at a lower cost. Like not always a lower cost, but like Misen has enclosed rims at a lower
Yep.
cost. Allclad, they wear down so quickly compared
Mm-hmm.
to everything else. If you see them at other people's houses, it's insane how much wear is around the rims. I hadn't had that experience because I take more care, but like seeing them in a normal kitchen, it's crazy how bad they are.
Yeah.
And people buy them thinking they're going to have them forever. I'm like, no, you're going to have that for 10 years.
Yeah. I think Allclad also got sued recently because the aluminum
Yeah.
wore down so
And
much
you can
that
cut
someone
yourself.
cut themselves.
Sure.
Crazy.
I mean,
But I think that's also part of the messaging that they deliver too, and that this is going to be a for life product.
yeah.
And so people take that very seriously. and
It'll be
they
true
think
if you
this
mostly
is
eat
going to be
McDonald's.
around forever, but then they put it in the dishwasher and they realize that aluminum shrinks, and then over time you get this very
I mean,
sharp edge.
yeah, I think that any stainless steel cookware is like a 10 to 20 year lifetime. Like the rivets will wear down at some point, or like you're going to have a mechanical
Mhm.
failure, and that's okay. It's still a lot of value out of a $100 to $300 piece of cookware, depending on anywhere in the range that you fall. I mean, if it's Goldilocks, it's like 50.
Yeah.
So for over 10 years, sure. I mean, I complain about this with the Le Creuset stuff just because the framework in your mind is always like, this thing should last me forever. And then when you see the price jump by 100% over the course of 10 years,
Yep.
that feels misaligned with your experience. But then when Allclad lost their market advantage, they decided to shift into other product categories, in particular small appliances, which we've seen from Viking,
Smeg.
Wolf. I mean, Smeg was never good at anything. They're an aesthetic brand, not a like quality brand.
You're right. Every Smeg fridge we've ever had in a hotel has never worked.
Yeah, they're not well-made products. They're just there for the look. You want to feel like you're in a 50s garage, like you're gonna bump elbows with the Fonz or some shit. Was that the 50s? I don't remember. That seemed 50s-ish.
Who knows? Happy days.
Happy days, motherfucker. Remember that Weezer video? That's Smeg.
That's Smeg.
The new Smeg ad, that Weezer video.
That one Weezer video.
But when someone moves outside of their core competency, especially at a high price point, that's like a big red flag.
Mm-hmm. And then we get to expensive and over-engineered products. And by over-engineering, we mean a company that's trying to solve a problem, but in the meantime creates a new problem
that you didn't previously have. We love that so much.
Love that.
I think the worst of the worst here are smart products.
That's smart products, yes.
Because they reduce the fixability of the product as well. So not only are they like introducing more complexity onto the product, we've been testing a GE profile stand mixer.
Mm-hmm.
One, I'll have it just sitting on the counter and it will throw an error and make a beeping noise at me.
What are we doing?
Why? You haven't been touched in a month. What are you doing? There shouldn't be an error. Two, they add on features that are not app-based, like a timer, which is extremely annoying to set because of the way that they've like made it's like a press and a long press.
Mm-hmm.
So if you press it, it goes up by 15 seconds. If you long press, it goes up by a minute. But if you jump to long pressing right away, it will still apply that first press. So you get whatever plus 15 seconds. So you have to go down again before you can start it.
Yeah.
That's really weird. The scale is the worst scale you've ever used. It takes 3 seconds to tear it, and then it's the reaction time is like half a second. It's so slow.
Yeah.
It feels absolutely awful. And if you push anywhere on the stand mixer, that applies it to the scale. So it must be in the very base. It's really just not a well thought out scale. If you press a button, it adds to the scale.
Yep.
Why?
What are we doing here? But I think the most irritating part of that device in particular is that when you open up the app,
Smart HQ.
Yeah, Smart HQ, gross. You have ads galore. I'm just waiting for them to add a subscription service to it.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the point of smart app appliances, just like AI products, are just like ways to tack on an $8 a month subscription somewhere.
And the HQ is just what? So that your stand mixer can talk to your fridge and your dishwasher and all of your other GE appliances? I assume that's where they're going with this.
Yeah, there's like definitely some world where you could like control it remotely, and that's a nice thing to have, but that's almost certainly like less than 1% of the use cases.
Mm-hmm.
So what does it matter? And then they also they have you sign with an account and say like, we're securely making it so that only you can use it. But then what if someone else is like using your stand mixer? They have to sign up for an account and also like repair it, and you have this whole nightmare. Yeah. It's just not helpful.
Yeah. Another device that kind of is along this line of expensive and over-engineered is the All-Clad. We tested an All-Clad cordless hand blender a while ago, and definitely
looked like C-3PO's dick on your counter.
Yeah, we had somebody come over and asked us if we had a dildo.
Why is there a chrome dildo on your counter?
It was like, oh shit. That is a hand blender, but I absolutely see what you're getting at. Yeah, I totally get it.
It sat in this little hub to charge, and that hub was extremely fragile. Not only was this whole thing coated in like chromed plastic, which felt terrible, it was just like really poorly constructed, and that hub broke, and so we just had cyber dildo chilling on the counter with no purpose.
Right. I don't think we could get a replacement for it either.
And it was like $330 at the time.
It was crazy.
It's much cheaper now, but
yeah,
that's, I mean, it's just All-Clad trying to do other things, and I don't think that worked well for them.
Yeah. I think the other thing I wanted to point out about that cordless hand blender in particular too is that I don't think it performed as well as the corded hand blenders.
Of course not, but that's physics.
Right.
If it's on
it's
battery,
never going to be as powerful.
We have to make a trade-off between battery life and performance. So
Correct.
Yeah.
So that's the big trade-off there. It's really similar to like our vacuums. We just got a new corded vacuum, and that thing sucks the shit out of our rugs.
That's its job.
Where we have a cordless vacuum also, and it's pitiful. The difference is
Listen, it works great for wood floors, which is most of what we had over the last like decade.
Mm-hmm.
So
Corded stuff. Usually better.
usually stronger, but
Usually
you're
stronger.
trading off convenience. Speaking of other expensive products, the Vitamix Ascent series has been a thorn in my side for a minute now.
Definitely an over-engineered product. And I think the over-engineering that they were doing here is that they were trying to make this be too many things at once.
Yeah, absolutely.
First and foremost, it is a blender.
It's like the blender base.
Yeah. But then they've also added a food processor.
So the Vitamix Ascent series is a replacement for the old Vitamix line that was all like numbers. Like I think we had like the 5200 or something, and there's like a 7600. Like it made no sense how they like increased because a lot of them would have the same motor and the same size pitchers. I didn't understand it. I think it was a feature set thing. It's weird. Now they've introduced the Ascent series, which is a little easier to parse. Not great. They still have a weird number thing in there, but you have the main pitcher that is nicer than the old pitcher for blending.
Mm-hmm.
But then they tried to make them all smart. So if you swap a different pitcher in, like a food processor one, in theory, you get both units in one.
Mm-hmm.
You just use the same base for both. Like saves counter space. That all sounds nice.
Yeah. In theory, sounds great.
But it locks the blender at one speed, which makes sense. But that one speed is still a blender speed, which means you're instantly pureed. Like it's so much faster than a food processor usually is that you're kind of toast no matter what.
And sometimes the pulse button that they have for the food processor feature doesn't.
It lags.
It doesn't identify that you've pushed it.
Yeah.
And so you'll have to push it a few times, but then by the time it figures out that you've been pushing it, it adds them all up somehow and then just keeps spinning and you're like, stop.
There's a lot of things where you have to like put the pitcher on and then like cycle it back to zero and then turn it back up.
Yeah.
Just depending on what has happened recently, which is weird too. It's just like the identification system is so slow that it's kind of a bad experience overall now.
Yeah. They've tried to solve too many problems and they've now created some fun new problems.
Yeah.
And then this one isn't necessarily expensive, but it is an example of over-engineering. It's a book.
Mm-hmm.
It's called Vegetable by Nick Sharma. And the thing that Nick was trying to do with this book was simplify.
Mm-hmm.
So he took the ingredient list and the directions and merged them together so that it's one big paragraph.
In theory, that sounds nice. Everyone always asks to have the ingredient amounts in the step where they're used.
Totally. Solving a problem, but in doing so, made it harder for us to create our grocery list while we were reviewing the book. And it was harder for us to keep track of where we were while we were actually cooking.
Because
we kept getting lost.
There's a difference in what information you need in the recipe step and what you need in the list. And the list has to be a lot more detailed.
Yep.
So you end up with a lot longer text. In this case, it was bold in the middle of regular text. And if you had like one line that had bold and one line that had bold, you'd get like kind of lost really easily because it's just jumping around in terms of textiles. That wasn't great.
Yeah. It made it harder for us to work out of it.
I loved the concept, but it just didn't play out.
And then we get to the good stuff, the products that are expensive because they're doing something unique that gives them a competitive edge.
Initially, I thought of these as like expensive just due to their engineering, but there's definitely a materials component as well. And I think the perfect example is Nanobond from Heston, which is tri-ply stainless steel cookware with sealed rims, very nice, with shaved rivets. Those are all expensive processes to do. And then they use a process called arc PVD to deposit a thin layer of titanium ceramic on the surface that makes it a little less sticky to work with.
It's like somewhere in between nonstick and stainless steel. It's not quite as sticky as stainless steel. It's not quite as nonstick as nonstick.
I think in the review I said if stainless steel is a staircase and nonstick is an escalator, then this is like a handrail. It's not like getting you all the way there. It's not doing all the work for you, but it's helping you get there like a little bit easier. Now, the cost of that is that it's very expensive.
Like $300 for a skillet?
Yeah, I think that's for the 11-inch. I tested the 8-inch first just because it was so expensive. And then once I saw that it was like performing really well, I got the 11-inch as well. And I was like, okay, there's a review here. There's something really interesting. I was so skeptical of them every time I saw them, which was mostly like the Culinary Institute of America has a shop in Napa, a couple shops in Napa actually. And we saw it there and I was like, this sounds so gimmicky and fake, and in fact it is great.
Yeah.
So I was very surprised by that, but it's also like a general upgrade. So not everything about the cookware, just a little bit better.
Yeah. Not a silver bullet.
Yeah.
But an improvement.
Yeah. It's just a small improvement on something that you're going to be using for the next, like I said, 10 to 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it does increase the durability in some ways, so it might be a little bit longer than that. Open question.
Kind of in that category is the Man Kitchen Pepper Cannon. We talked about this in our interview with May a little bit too, trying to justify the cost of a $200 pepper grinder that does the job very well.
These are our main pepper grinders that we have. We have one other one over there that's technically for long pepper, which was $150.
Yeah.
But this Peugeot is a plastic surround on a metal mechanism that they've custom designed that is like really easily changeable with this rotating cuff. I have had these rip out of the grinder before. It doesn't take much abuse to do either. And this was $120. Then we've got this Skeppshult, which was $100. It's kind of shitty wood, but it had some cool like cast iron details and like a cork lid. It's just like nice, easy to work with. But the grind mechanism is a crush grind, which you can find in like any woodworking shop. So it's not very good. It's a kind of shitty plastic and ceramic joint, but it's fine. It's nothing special. And so if I'm going to pay $100 for something that is just like okay, $200 for something that's going to last longer and is nicer. Let me show some details, I guess.
Yeah.
There's this catch built into it so you don't just spill pepper all over the counter, which
Kinda
I think
nice.
is nice. I said I think it's kind of silly that it has an O-ring on it, which I might just take out. It has a really nice... Oh,
There
I
goes
just
a
dumped
bunch of pepper.
pepper on the couch. It has a really nice adjustment mechanism that's all metal all the way to the edges. It's all milled aluminum for the most part, powder coated, it looks like, or bead blasted. I'm not sure which. And then to open it up, you just press this little button and it just like pops off, and it's a very satisfying sound when it connects. Scares the dog.
Yep, scares the dog.
I mean, it's pretty good. If you're getting a new one and you want something that's going to last a long time, it's not the worst idea.
Yeah.
It doesn't say Man Kitchen on it. It doesn't say Pepper Cannon. It also grinds way faster. It does the thing for real. So,
I don't think it's going to be lasting for life, but it'll last
a long time.
hopefully a decent amount of time. Yeah.
It's just that it's one of those things where I'm like, yeah, I would probably recommend it, but I'd have to roll my eyes every time I did it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No.
That's kind of where I ended up.
Yeah.
It just feels silly to say $200 pepper grinder.
It's such a silly thing, but it does the job well, and it's, yeah, nicely engineered. It's just really expensive.
Now, the other one I was talking about that I said was a $500 pepper grinder, I got my facts wrong there. It's $320 or $580 for the set of pepper and salt grinders.
I see.
Those ones are made by a specialty espresso company called Weber Workshop, and they're just even goofier. They have like a magnetic dial grinding ring, or grind dialing ring. That's what I meant.
Okay.
It's so obnoxious, and yeah. That's kind of where I'm like, okay, well, as long as there's one of these, whatever the cheapest one of those is the acceptable option. So I think there doesn't need to be any upgrades from this point. Like
We figured it out.
the Weber Workshop one is just like, it's trying to do it a different way. I think for the extra cost, it's not worth it. So really, I guess the point there is whatever the like balance of good engineering and cost is, because beyond this, you're not really getting any additional benefit.
It's a pepper grinder, for fuck's sake.
Yeah. I don't know. Then we've got things that aren't like super, super expensive, but feel expensive for what they are, like the chef's press.
The chef's press is basically just a thing that holds down food while you're cooking it. So we use it a lot for grilled cheese. If we want like a very even crust, we'll use our chef's press tossed on top to give it some weight so that it's evenly cooked.
But the engineering aspect of it is that it's just a small piece of stamped steel that has a clever handle on it so that they can stack up. It's a really nice set of details, but ultimately it feels expensive for the materials that it is and the costs that come with that. Just compared to what you would normally expect, it feels expensive. Now there's definitely like support costs baked into that. There's shipping costs, and there's lifetime value calculations. Like, how many of these will I ever need to sell to one person? Probably not that many, because they're not going to go bad. I actually have used them for things that I was concerned would degrade them, and they haven't.
Like pickling stuff or throwing it in the dishwasher.
I wish I had tested those before I put out the review. I just was trying to take care of them, and I didn't do it.
So if you've seen that review, amendment to that part of it.
I'm learning all the time.
Yeah. But then we've got other things that are, expensive due to their unique engineering, like the Breville Control Freak, which is a induction cooktop.
There's two of them now. There's the home one, which has all the chef steps recipes in it, and which is not helpful in any way
No,
to me.
God, no.
But it's both smaller and quieter than the original,
Mhm.
which are both huge improvements. Both of them still have the ability to be controlled by a thermometer, which is really nice. Like there's a lot of fine details in here, and actually they're so much quieter than everything else that if you see a like creator using an induction like cooktop and it's not super loud, it's almost certainly the Control Freak.
Yeah.
It's very good at that. It's $1,000
crazy.
though, which is like way above everything else in the
Yeah.
market.
But crazy quiet compared to everything else on the market. And I think that's where they've really figured it out.
Yeah. It is really annoying to control it. Like it's much slower than just like turning a knob on your stove, especially with the home unit, which you have to like select modes and then start. And then lastly,
we've got our Hyperfixation Products.
which oftentimes it'll be things for like pastry, having a proofer.
Right.
Getting like, I mean, there's a million tools for sourdough. There's a million tools for ice cream.
Fermentation is a big one.
And like it's really easy to fall
Beer
down those rabbit
making.
holes. Coffee and ice cream are the two that like have become our hyperfixations
Yep.
and the ones where it kind of stuck. I mean, there have been
Yep.
other ones that didn't stick, but these are the good exambles.
Yeah,
These ones
the
make
money
us.
pits.
These ones cast us in the most positive light.
They're the money pits, but I tell you what the heart wants. What the heart wants.
Yeah. Following up on the ice cream from last week, we mentioned the winter. I think our first one was a KitchenAid, which I believe was $60 for the bucket, and you just froze it and you stuck in your KitchenAid, and it did a stand mixer thing, but with ice. Like it
Yeah.
wasn't that complex. When we started making more batches than that I could handle, we moved to a compressor unit made by Winter that allowed us to just rapidly produce 2 quarts at a time in just rapid succession. Then when we started getting really into the fine details of like crystallization times and overrun management and things like that, we upgraded to one that didn't have an air gap. So most of them have a bucket that you can pull out. We wanted one that didn't have an air gap, and that's the one that we have now, which is called the Lello Muso Pola 5030.
It is so expensive.
It's $1,000 because it's, I mean, all the compressor units are essentially like an air conditioner with like a bucket inside it. This one has a monobody surround. So like it's one giant piece of stainless steel that has the bowl in it. And because of that, like really awkward piece of engineering, it's very expensive. It is so much nicer than every other one I've had before. It is way harder to clean, but it lets me freeze things a little bit faster, and that reduces crystallization without increasing sugar content. And
but listen, if you don't care about any of that, or if you don't even know what that means,
you shouldn't buy it.
Don't start there.
Yeah, like even if you're like very well off, it is much more of a hassle to take care of than any of those other ones I mentioned.
Yeah.
In particular, I think like the Winter is probably where most people should stop. That's about $200. If you're really into ice cream, that's a good option.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'd probably go with like a frozen bucket.
Yep. It does the thing. It tastes good.
I went to the Winter when I needed to make, I think it was like 12 batches in a week.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, okay, this is the
It was a
breaking
lot.
point. I can't do this in a KitchenAid at all. And I was already like pretty deep down the rabbit hole of making ice cream.
Oh yeah.
So,
my hyperfixation that I got into was coffee roasting.
mhm.
So how I looked at this was, okay, what is the least amount of stuff I have to buy to get this out the door to try this? And it was just roasting beans in your kitchen on a skillet.
And
which
you have a fear of
is extremely dangerous because there's this stuff around the shell that will dehydrate and become extremely flammable called chaff. And if that gets in the air, it can start on fire, and then you've just got floating chaff that's like lit up on fire all over your kitchen. I've just read so many horror stories about people starting fires in their kitchen trying to roast coffee, and I was like, okay, we're not starting there. That's I am not confident enough in my ability to read this to do this on my own. So I ended up going with the Baymore 2000 AB plus. Yeah. It was still like $479, but I believe there was a sale. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to invest in this and try it.
I feel like I remember it being like $350 at the time.
Sure. It doesn't matter. That's where I started and found out that I really liked it, but that tool didn't have enough fidelity for me. I wanted to learn more about like when things were cracking and changing and developing, and really fine tune a lot of the flavors that I was getting out of my coffee, and you couldn't do that with this machine. This was just a roast it, use your ears to figure out where things were cracking and go from there.
It also, like, while it had smoke filters, it would make the whole house so smoky.
Yeah, it was
It's like a countertop unit, and like I just smell smoke and be like, oh, Sarah's grinding coffee, and then I'd like
roasting.
Look over the railing, and she's just got her ear up to it, trying to figure out when to push the button again.
You have to get so close to the thing, and Bryn would be like, what are you doing there? And I'm like, shut up! I have to be able to hear it. But I realized that I wanted to invest more into this, and so I upgraded, and I got the Aleo Bullet.
V3.
V3 or 2, one of those.
It's V3.
Okay. And that was around $2,000. So that's a jump to get to that next step.
I think that was like a birthday present or something.
Yeah. I think I combined it. I was like, this is birthday and Christmas. I don't want anything else this year. But I loved it. It throws up so much smoke, and you have to do it outside, and it's like kind of a pain in the butt to put together. But I had so much fun dialing in my roasts.
The fact that it like graphs it on your computer as you're roasting and
that
stuff,
was sick.
It's pretty sick.
So that's where I'm at with that. I don't know if I'm going to go any further, but I feel like as far as hyperfixations go, that was a smart call on my part.
It got you to the point where you could experiment at a reasonable scale. Like it's a little more than a bag of coffee. It's not like an insane amount.
Yeah.
But it gave you fidelity and said, okay, now I can take this roast to like a bigger commercial roaster if I want to do something with this later.
Exactly.
It's like just enough fidelity.
Exactly. Yeah. If I want to upgrade later, I can. But it's also nice to give as gifts to friends too. Like a bag of coffee is never a bad thing, and people are always impressed when I'm like, I roasted this.
It's fun to make like ice cream for events too. Like I think that's like the big thing is like, okay, we got to the point where we can do things at a pretty high level for friends, and that's enough for us. But it like spending that much money to get there, I don't think most people need to do.
Yeah, I don't think you do either.
But these are the ones that have kind of stuck with us and feel like more justified than most.
Yeah.
So ultimately, coming down to it, rules.
Okay, we've got
Outcomes.
4 rules now.
As a general rule, don't buy smart products unless that is your kink. And you're just going to be into it all the time, always, because it is now your lifestyle.
Yep, this is now it. You're going to be solvent. You're going to be like trying to figure out bugs the entire time.
Smart home and Internet of Things is an exercise in extreme patience and telling people, no, that doesn't work right now.
Yep. And most brands look at these as a way to add on subscriptions or put more ads in front of you. So I don't know.
Just where you want them, in your appliances, all over your kitchen.
So skeptical of smart products.
Simple is better than clever.
That's our second one.
And the fewest amount of parts is probably a good indication. If something has to be very complex to succeed, that's fine. Like clever engineering is not the worst thing in the world, but it will make fixing it more complicated as well. So getting into things like KitchenAid, which is not a clever machine at all, and the fact that it has like sacrificial gears and you only have to replace the one part typically, which is still a little adventure, but it's not like heavy duty. I think the GE example is going to be like, okay, I can't flash the firmware. I can't like fix their app. So like there's a lot of things that can go wrong that I just have no control over anymore. And those can all be considered moving parts as well.
Number 3, brands that do one thing are most of the time better than brands that do many things.
Trusting them to specialize, it's a big thing. Like GE makes jet engines and microwaves and NBC and like
upward revenue stream dynamics.
Yeah. And lastly, if there's something that you really feel like you want to do, it's worth investing into. We're not going to tell you not to do that, but baby steps.
Baby steps. Do it in increments.
Listen, we're not trying to tell you can't have the thing. We want you to have the thing. Like, we think you deserve it.
We just don't want you to ruin your life in the process.
Yeah, like, don't become destitute. Like, don't overinvest in something and then have it sit in a room and, like, feel, disappointed and deflated about it.
Yeah. Don't get a full printing press and just end up shoving it in your garage.
Why am I being abused in this episode?
No, I'm saying we invested in a full printing press.
Well, it was for packaging, and we were running a condiment company at the time. We needed it
at the time.
All right, Sarah, we have a question from Amy, and I'm getting the vibe that Amy might be young, and therefore, Amy, I'm sorry that I said a lot of bad words in this episode.
Oh yeah, sorry, Amy. Unless you're cool.
All right, here's Amy.
Hi, I'm Amy. I'm Jason's daughter. From TikTok, I think. I've been listening to your podcast with my dad, and I'm kind of curious on what your craziest story is that has happened in the kitchen. Yeah, that's it. Bye.
Cute.
Adorable. Thank you, Amy.
Thank you, Amy. We are going to answer your questions. I have been excited to answer your questions.
Sarah has more crazy stories than I have.
Yeah, I will kick this off.
Sarah's really put her kitchens through it.
I really have. I put myself through it, I think, more than the actual kitchens, except for one. And we'll start there. When I was in high school, I was trying to teach myself how to make donuts and used a smaller pot and a lot of oil, like maybe too much. No, definitely too much oil in a smaller pot, and just cranked up the heat because I was like, it just has to get really hot, right? Didn't realize that you had to keep track of that. Didn't realize that you couldn't fill up oil that high in a pan. I think I left maybe a half inch at the top.
That's wild.
Yeah.
And then you put a donut in there?
Well, no, I hadn't put a donut.
You didn't even get to that point?
I didn't even get to that point.
Wow. I've heard the story a million times and I didn't even know that.
I walked away while I was waiting for my oil to heat up, and I heard this like click, 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 and then just like poof. I heard this like just poof, and I looked over, and the whole pot, it was just the pot, it was contained within the pot, but it was on fire.
Wait,
like,
how big is this pot? This big or
oh, it
this
was
big?
it was like a
saucepan?
Like a 2-inch saucepan.
2-quart saucepan?
Yeah, it was like a 2
inches, a whole new environment.
It was a 2-quart saucepan. The whole thing was on fire. Just very contained, but on fire. And the first thing I learned about fires was that you put water on it, or stop, drop, and roll. And because I wasn't on fire, I was like, we put water on it. And so I just filled up a thing of water and dumped it on. And as I was dumping it on, there was this little voice in the back of my head that said, oh, maybe this is a bad idea. I feel like maybe there was another thing that we heard about, like oil and water not going well together. But by that point, the water was already on the oil, and I was already experiencing what happens, which is it becomes basically a fireball. And so it just exploded. The fire exploded in my face, and I almost burned my kitchen down. Luckily, I walked away unscathed, did not burn the house down, and I learned don't put water on oil fires. But was also terrified of cooking after that.
I think a lot of people know that Sarah has been scared of deep frying for a while. Like that's been an ongoing reference in a lot of our videos. So That's why.
Yep. My dad was really mad at me, and he was more mad at me that I tried to clean up my mess after, because apparently if you try to clean up soot from a fire, the inspector or the insurance adjuster can't tell if there's more damage because you touched it versus letting it go. And so it's harder for them to evaluate the damage. So if you do start a fire in your kitchen, don't touch it.
Don't touch the fire.
Don't touch. Yeah, if you do, don't try to clean it up afterward. Just leave it.
Mine are not that compelling. One of my first recipes I ever wrote, this was as like a 17-year-old, I want to say. No, that can't be right because it has tequila in it. I must have been 20
Yeah,
something.
you had to have been.
Somewhere in there. I made a recipe for a marinated chicken, and the marinade involved tequila. That's what I remember. And I did a test run of it, a couple of them, at home, and they were great. It was just like a fajita chicken situation. And then we went on a houseboat trip, and I pre-prepped a big batch of it for the large amount of people that were going to be there. Packed it all up, kept it nice and cold, all the good things.
Yep.
For 3 days.
So this chicken is just getting marinated in tequila for 3 days.
Now, for those of you who don't know, tequila will break down protein. Alcohol will break down protein. And so what we ended up with was not only bitter, but
the grossest texture.
The outside had like dissolved into like pink sludge.
Oh, it was so gross.
And then we all had to eat it because it's all we had to eat.
Literally, that's all we had that day.
So we grilled it and we were just like, oh, like
choking this thing down like it's
I've been
good.
talking such a big game because I was so happy with how it had turned out in testing.
Everyone was excited.
And then I'm just sitting there like on the edge of tears, like, what the fuck? How did this happen?
So the moral of the story is don't marinate chicken in tequila for 3 days.
I mean, don't marinate things for that long anyway, for the most part. But like that was so wild, and I just didn't see it coming at all. So I was so frustrated.
I'd also like to tell you about the time that I broke my hand while I worked at Buffalo Wild Wings.
All right, you got to speed run this one though.
Okay, this one's gonna be
I know
faster.
it can get long.
It's a long one, so I'll try to cliff note this. I was closing down. It was 2 a.m. I was trying to get out of there as fast as I could. I was in the back. It gets slippery in the back. And I slipped and I fell, and I just remember hitting my hand on a fridge.
Yeah, you punched a fridge.
It was right by my manager's office. So my manager saw me go down, saw me stay down, and just like hold my hand. I was like holding my hand like, oh my God, it hurts so bad. I don't know what I did, but I think I jammed my finger or something. And it was taking me a lot longer to recover than it should have, I remember. And I was like, I am just in a lot of pain and I just need a second. And he was being a dick.
Yeah, well, he was a dick.
So he was like, well, you still need to close. So you have to get up and you have to get going because I need to get home. And I was like, yeah, just give me a second, dude. I took as much time as I could, and then I finally got up, and my hand was still killing, and I managed to close.
You closed, and then you drove home
which
one-handed.
Was crazy. I drove myself home. I got back home to Bryn, and I was like, I need your help. I have a ring on my finger, and I think I jammed my finger, so I need to get the ring off of that finger. And
Before
I
it
remember
swells.
ripping that ring off of my...
I had to hold you off the ground.
off of my broken hand at like 3 a.m. And then I passed out. And the next day I went to hang out with one of my college friends, and she was in school for
Sports
medicine.
Yep.
And so I was telling her how much my hand hurt and how I couldn't really move it, and I was having a hard time doing anything with it. And she was like, let me see it. And so then she looks at it and she's like, I'm pretty sure your hand's broken. And I was like, I don't believe that. And so she drives me to the hospital. We go to the hospital. I get an x-ray. Turns out it is broken. They tried to tell me I had bone cancer too.
That was a whole...
Which is a whole other story.
A process to go through. Like, we'd just gotten engaged, I think, at this point. And
right.
Sarah's like, so I think I have cancer. And I'm like,
like,
oh my God, there's so much
me.
happening right now. Yeah, she went down like this dark path. I'm like, no, chill out.
I was like, you don't want to be with me. I'm going to die. It was a whole thing.
One knuckle at a time.
Yeah. And so I was like, I'm going to get a second opinion. Got the second opinion. They were like, you don't have bone cancer. It's fine. And so then they wrapped me up. They put a cast on me. The woman who put the cast on me, I think, pushed my hand down further than it needed to go. And so now I have this like dented...
She's got one small knuckle.
I have this one very small knuckle
Show
where
the
all
camera.
the other knuckles are normal.
That direction isn't visible.
I
that
just
one
have
is,
this
yeah.
like dip where there should be a knuckle. And
we call it her knucky.
Bryn calls it my knucky.
Apparently,
and sometimes it clicks, but most of the time it's okay.
Apparently, it was a ticking time knuckle though. Like it was gonna break at some point.
Yeah, it was like my growth plate didn't move fast enough when I was going through a growth spurt, and my bone just like sucked it up and kept going. So I had this like breaking point.
Yeah.
But luckily I got...
Luckily you got to experience it at Buffalo Wild Wings.
Luckily I got it. It happened at Buffalo Wild Wings, so I didn't have to pay any of the medical costs, workers' comp.
Love that.
It was great. As a college student, I was like, this is the best way to break your hand.
Highly recommend. 5 stars.
Yeah.
Then the only other one I can think of, this was like one of the most stressful days of my life, even though it was like very simple. My parents have a kitchen set up for cooking for 5 people. I have 2 siblings and then my parents. And then one year, my sister's in-laws came over, which was like 12 people. And then my grandma and my aunt were like, our extended families were all there. It was like 26 people. And I said, yeah, of course I'll make dinner for everyone. And we'd been doing ossobuco with risotto recently. So I was like, I'll just do this. Like that seems like an easy thing to do in bulk. Like it's a long cook time. It's like very like hands off. Like this is a pretty nice thing to do. What I didn't account for was the sheer amount of space required to cook 26 pork shanks,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we ended up doing like 21 or 22 because there's a bunch of kids. But like, I was using every surface in that kitchen. I was turning pans that should not be used. Like, I was putting a roasting pan on an electric griddle to get like more surface area. Like, I was getting everything into something that should not be working.
Yep. It was really chaotic. Honestly, a little bit MacGyver-y too.
Yeah, it was just the whole kitchen was covered. Like every surface was like, I was borrowing cookware from people. I was like, hey, you're coming over. Can you bring like X, Y, or Z with you? Like an electric saute pan or I don't know. I was just reaching for anything I could. And it took a little longer than it needed to, as I recall. And things were not fully tender,
Oh no.
I would say. Everything was cooked, but it took some time. I was so unprepared for this
Mm-hmm.
thing. I felt so bad. This is one of those things where
He's just got so much.
I was early in my like, oh, food is my thing
Mm-hmm.
career or whatever you want to call that. And it was very easy to mess up without the ability to do test runs.
Mm-hmm.
And I just didn't realize that.
The thing I like about you, though, Bryn, is that when you get excited about
There's
something...
one thing you like about me? I didn't think there were.
When you get excited about something, you just fucking do it. You just start.
Oops.
And sometimes you don't always measure twice before you start. But it somehow works out most of the time. My biggest problem is that I will overthink things and then convince myself not to do it because I will realize how much work it's going to be as I'm thinking about it.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that carbon dioxide setup I have set up in the garage to refill our SodaStream bottles that has been sitting there for months and doesn't have the right connectors for it. I jumped right in. Let's
Bryn,
go.
when are you going to do this?
Yeah.
You said it was going to be so easy.
All right, Sarah, let's get to your most Californian injury, please.
All right, my last story that I have, Amy, is the time that I cut myself trying to make guacamole. So usually what I would do with an avocado is like split it in half and then whack the seed with a knife and then kind of like
Twist it out.
twist it out of there.
You know, the usual way.
This particular avocado must have had a very...
Nope, it was normal. I watched you do it.
Okay, well, I whacked it.
You didn't whack it. You just pushed.
Oh. Okay, well, this avocado in particular,
This
for some
avocado
reason,
tricked me.
I decided to like I thought I whacked it, but apparently I pushed it and it slid through the nut and into my hand. And at first I looked at my hand and I said, oh, okay, well, it appears that I've cut myself.
And I was running for paper towels.
And so then I was like, I think I'm going to be okay. And then the blood happened and it came out hot and fast. And so I was like, oh, it's bad. And I ran my hand into the sink. And
I think
just,
that's
like,
all you said was, oh, it's bad.
Yeah.
The most Minnesotan way to do this.
And then I ran.
That's bad.
Yeah, that's bad. And then I ran my hand under the sink. And I was like, I think it'll be okay if I just hold my hand under the sink for a minute. And then like 5 minutes went by and it wasn't done bleeding and it was still gushing. And
we wrapped it and put it in tape and everything, and it was like bleeding through everything.
yeah,
and
it just
so...
kept bleeding. And so then Bryn brought me to the emergency room where they glued me back together, but not before complimenting Bryn on his sharp knives.
They're like, that cut is surgical. And I was like, I just sharpened it.
Thanks so much. I appreciate it. And I have a little bit of nerve damage in my pointer finger on my left hand. So there are some times where I can't quite feel everything at the tip of my finger. But that's about it. I think I got pretty lucky considering
I saw a lot
I have
more...
a lot of mobility still, which is great. It's a little stiff on my pointer finger, but aside from that, I think I walked away pretty...
I saw a lot more of the inside of your hand than I wanted to that day.
Oh, yeah. Everyone saw more of the inside of my hand than they wanted to that day. I have pictures, but I'm not going to show you.
It was rough. Thank you for the question, Amy. That was challenging to reminisce on.
Yeah, hopefully that wasn't too much for you to hear. I guess the takeaway is don't put water on oil fires. Don't
Soak meat in
marinate
tequila.
chicken in tequila for 3 days. If you are going to get injured and break something, do it at your work. Plan ahead if you are making a meal for 24 people. And don't cut avocados with a knife the way I did.
Don't push. Tap.
Have it on a cutting board. Don't hold it in
Sure,
your hand.
coward.
Don't hold it in your hand.
All right, on for something a little bit lighter. Absolutely rank Cookbook green flags. We each have 10. I wanted it to be equal to our red flags.
Okay.
Are you going to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Okay. My number one green flag for a cookbook is if the author started with a blog or published their recipes online somewhere else before writing a cookbook.
Interesting.
I think it just gives you the ability to work out a lot of kinks before you actually publish something.
Right.
And so I think that the recipes always turn out better, especially if you are not famous.
Totally.
If you start as like an individual person who's just interested in cooking, I think it turns out a lot better. So that is my number one green flag.
My first one is the cover shows off what the fuck is special about the content. That could be the food, the author's visual taste, the design language of the place it's from, something to that effect. Examples of this that stand out to me: First Generation,
Okay.
which has a beautiful photo of some dumplings that are like lovingly handmade. Like that's what makes Frankie special, is his ability to just create the most like visual, like, stunning visual presentations.
Yep.
Agak was another one. So this is like, it's showing off the like visual style of a place.
Yeah.
And I think that is compelling. So while it shows food, it's definitely not like a dish per se.
Right.
It's like an idea. And I think that was definitely something where I'm like, okay, I feel confident because you're putting so much care into this.
Into this first
whereas
blush.
So many of them are like generic photo,
Right.
name, done.
Yeah.
Now, this is specifically in contrast to like having someone's face be the cover. If your face is your cover, then I don't trust your food to be good.
Yeah, right. This is kind of along the lines of the blog thing. So this is a little bit piggybacky. The author was a food writer previously. So blogs are more for like individual people. And food writers are for people like Persiana is a good example of this. Sabrina Gayor was a writer previously and ran a supper club before she wrote her cookbook.
Okay.
Ileana, also a good example, wrote for the SF Chronicle for food.
I think among other things, yeah.
Before writing her cookbook.
Mm-hmm.
And Khushbu Shah, back here behind me,
Yep.
right
Amrikan.
here. For Amrikan, wrote for Food and Wine before she published this. I think it just gives
She works
you
at New York Times now, I think so.
a better idea of how to write food for the average person.
Writing is such like an underrated skill in recipe design as well.
Mm-hmm.
Totally.
I think writing is like the big
differentiator.
Yeah.
Kind of feels like a 1.5, but sure.
That's my 2.
My 2 is the name gives context, but is still creative. E.g., Sift or Brave Tart. Like you kind of get where it's going, but it's like creative, as opposed to something like Sauces or The Great Scandinavian Baking Book.
I see.
Like they're a little too literal. Like they're not really trying to be creative. They tell you what they are. Then there's stuff that is like, I don't know, like a turn of phrase, like pass the plate, doesn't tell you anything about it.
Yeah, right.
So no hate to Carolina or anything like that, but like it just doesn't give you anything.
It's a good one. My number 3 is the author is enthusiastic about food. Mine are a lot about the author, honestly. My example of this is like Eric Wareheim. Eric Wareheim, as a human,
it's part of his personality.
Yeah, as a human being, is extremely enthusiastic about food, and you can tell that in all of his work. And so, cooking out of Foodheim was kind of fun because you could tell that he was getting excited about making this book because he's genuinely excited about food.
Yeah, there are people who are in food that are not like excited about it, and Eric's whole bit is that he's like just so stoked about it.
Right.
My number 3 was just specialized. So if it's about something specific, I usually expect like that book to go so hard.
Yeah.
It doesn't always, but a lot of times it works pretty well.
Yeah. Really yeah. Okay. So that's like my number 4.
Yeah.
It's like very similar to that. Mine is like a book has a strong and focused premise. Sure. And my example for this is Coconut and Sambal. It's extremely focused on Indonesian food from an Australian lens.
Yeah, it has a clear lens.
Very clear.
Lens is very important for me.
Yeah, very clear lens and very focused on like what you're going to get out of this book, and I think you're going to deliver.
My 4 is based on the assumption that a book is at like the standard price point.
Okay.
So like $30 to $35 is what it usually is here in the U.S. 100 recipes.
Yep.
If it's like 80 or less, that starts to feel like not enough.
Yeah.
If it's over at most 120, I think like the realities of publishing set in, and I know that you've had so little time to do this and turn it around that it's going to be it's going to feel underpolished. So I would rather have it be a little overbaked than a little underbaked.
Mhm.
And 100 recipes, $35 is like the sweet spot, I think.
I agree with that. Okay. My number 5 is the recipes use metric ingredient measurements over imperial.
Yeah.
Uh,
In particular, grams, but
in particular,
even
grams.
mils is a lot easier, yeah.
The reasoning behind that is that you're going to get the most accurate outcome to what the author intends.
And a little bit easier probably too.
Oh, yeah. Definitely easier.
Measuring with a scale, just so
But
much
like
faster.
green flag, if you've done that for me,
Mhm.
perfect. Give it to me in grams.
My number 5. The book is broken down by dish function, not by protein. Like if I see that it's like breakfast and then lamb, chicken, fish, like beef, pork, like that is like do something else with it. Like give it a different approach. Like this is going to be this type of dish across all these different proteins is usually going to be more compelling. Like I have an opinion on this thing in general rather than like here's how I use this protein. Here's how I use this protein. That's just not as interesting. I don't want to see 10 ways to use pork. I want to see like, here's how I think about applying these things to the same dish in many different ways.
I see. Interesting. My number 6 is authors show examples of difficult techniques when words fail to explain something well, because words are hard and sometimes a picture is much easier to follow.
So this is the
than a
family
description.
meal and start here?
The family meal start here does this. I think the Chinese way, I haven't cooked out of this book yet, but it's encouraging to me because she does illustrations.
Yeah, All Under Heaven
of
does
folds.
that too.
Yeah. Illustrations or photos of like different folds that might be tricky to describe in words. I think if the author has taken that time to show you that detail, QR codes could work too, I guess, in this instance, if you want to show somebody how to do something specifically. But if an author has taken the time to do that for you, I am much more interested in cooking out of it.
Yeah, that makes sense. Every recipe shows up in at least one photo.
Yeah.
Especially if you're new to a cuisine and you're trying to picture what the outcome is.
Yep.
It can be really challenging. It's nice to have just one photo. Like it can be a group photo where like it's like pictured this page and it's like a big full spread or something like that. That's totally fine.
Yeah.
But I want to have like some reference to work with.
I do understand that for a lot of authors that gets really expensive to do.
That's why I was saying like it can be part of
the spread thing makes a lot of sense. My number 7, the photos look good, but not too good. Like I don't want the focus to be on the extra stuff around the food, or I don't want the food to look so stylized that it's not.
You want it to be accurate.
Exactly how it's going to come out or how you describe that it's going to come out. Yeah, I want it to look like how you're describing it.
Yeah.
I want to look like it's achievable in my home kitchen, but pretty so I want to make it.
Mine, and this kind of goes back to your lens point. The book is personal rather than exhaustive. Like I don't want you to describe all the food of a region or a place or whatever. I want your viewpoint on that food.
Yep.
That is like very important to me. I don't care about what is authentic necessarily beyond a certain point. Like understanding it from like a book perspective is interesting. I don't think we need to relitigate authenticity every time there's a book from a given region.
Yeah.
And so I would rather see what was authentic to you or what like your experience was like rather than
the truest version of this cuisine.
A canonical book is just never correct.
Yeah, no.
Everyone's going to disagree on everything. Like that chili and beans video. We've got 30 people from Texas arguing about whether or not there's beans in chili. Like authenticity is just different to individuals.
That was a good one.
It's the same as yours.
My number 8 is the author includes pairing suggestions.
Okay.
This is especially if you're not familiar with a cuisine, having a starting point for people is so helpful. Like coconut and sambal is a perfect example of this. Start Here does this really well. Persiana does this well. Africana does this really well, where they give either in the prose of an individual recipe or a menu suggestion in the back of the book that says these are the things that go really well together, or this is how I would pair some of these things together to get you started.
I think coconut and sambal in particular, when we were like unfamiliar with how to eat in like an Indonesian tradition, makes a lot of sense to have that like extra pairing detail. This one's a little bit abstract maybe, but it passes the flip test, which is when I'm flipping through it in a bookstore.
Oh, the flip test.
There's at least like 2 or 3 recipes where I'm like, oh shit, I want that so bad.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Just a couple,
Yeah.
but like it's clear there are some bangers in here. Like, okay, now I'm interested in like pursuing the rest, but like I don't want to have to like check every recipe to find what's like really special.
Yeah.
I want to flip through a few times and be like, oh, hell yeah.
This sounds good or this looks good.
I want that now.
My number 9 is the author has fun with writing. This is another one for Foodheim. And I would also include a super upsetting cookbook about sandwiches by Tyler Cord. If I'm having fun reading your writing about food, I'm probably going to be more interested in cooking it.
Yeah.
Like if I can tell that you're having a good time writing this, I'm probably going to want to make more of your stuff.
Mm-hmm. My 9 is actually very closely related to that, which is like consistent author voice.
Yeah.
If it feels like the you I know from somewhere else, then that really like helps. If I can read it in your voice.
It's so crazy to me that you can read that in writing too.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've been told many times I write exactly how I talk.
Yeah, same. My number 10, last one. This is kind of snarky, but the author did not come from a big organization. So Bon Appetit.
Oh, I see.
Or Ottolenghi or the Food Network.
A big like food like brand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they didn't come from a big food brand.
Yeah, I don't expect
I'm probably going to be more interested in what they have to say. Because I just assume that they're going to be edited like crazy if they come from a big organization. I could be wrong. But the books that we have reviewed from authors who graduated or came from those experiences have not been as good.
The Food Network thing definitely stands out to me. Like Food Network now is like such a cheesy brand.
Yeah.
Even like, I don't know, ATK feels
seriously.
weird too. Like publishing a bunch of books under one brand feels very strange. Or like the type of creators that came from like a group setting also, like Bon Appetit Test Kitchen. Like I don't think any of those books have been hits for us, have they? Yeah.
Not yet.
Interesting.
I have yet to be proven wrong.
My last one's very simple. No breakfast section. Thanks.
You don't want a breakfast section?
Nope. Fuck breakfast.
Yeah, we're not huge breakfast people.
I think breakfast is such a different food group for so many people that it rarely is the kind of thing I'm worried about cooking. I would much rather focus on dinner dishes, which tend to be where the interesting stuff is.
Yeah.
At least in the American diet. He's got opinions about breakfast sections.
I guess, yeah. He's having dreams about breakfast.
Anyway, that's all for today. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Thank you to our subscribers who help us. Thank you for telling your friends, apparently, about us, because holy shit, we've been growing.
That's great.
Thank you. That it means the world to us.
Yeah, seriously. Thank you, Amy, for asking the question.
That was a very fun
today.
question.
It was so fun. Sorry it took so long to get around to it.
We had to think.
If you are interested in asking a question like Amy, there's a link
in the description.
Or you can call us. We have a phone number if you want to call in like Amy did.
In the description. I think we're going to change how we do the phone ones and make it so people can share audio files that will sound a lot better, because some of them are pretty hard to hear. Mm-hmm. The downside of phone technology. And it'll make it so that people outside of the U.S. can more easily do it.
Great.
Participate. So
I love it.
I've done one test so far and it worked. And so
we'll probably
work in progress.
But in the meantime, the links and the phone number are in the description.
Yeah.
Thank you so much again. We'll see you next Sunday. Bryn, do you want to go eat some food?
We have ice cream sandwiches now.
Yeah, we do have ice cream.
Hell yeah, dog.
Fry, do you want to eat some food?
He's like, I was in my sleep.
Totally disinterested.